Every year I know we gonna go hard. We been that team ever since Bart started. All my cheese heads go pack go. Ain't showing no mercy, cutting no slack, no. I ain't a bad sport and I'll even wish you good luck. Only thing I will.
Welcome to Lombardi's Legends Podcast. Dane here with Wags. What's up? Packer preseason game number 2 already in the books. First one at Lambeau Field, and there's a lot to talk about, I think, Wags, after all of that. But first of all, how you doing, buddy? It's great to see you. It's Monday night, feeling good post-Packer preseason.
Yeah, feeling great. Just getting ready for the heat wave that's apparently going to be striking Wisconsin here in the next couple of days. So I'm sure practice will be moving indoor for the Packers. But yeah, I mean, it was nice to be able to kick back Saturday night and watch some more football. I know it's just preseason, but I think there was some really nice developments, both storylines going into the game based on, where some of the guys were and some of the performances as well. So we've got some good reaction to get into. And Dane, I'm excited to break that all down as well.
No doubt about it. And folks, as we're getting started here, those of you that are on the listen on the podcast, you know that we always simulcast and do an awful lot of stuff. So right on the front end, just add in Wags to Insta Live, and he's going to be jumping on Insta Live here momentarily as well. So what's up Insta Live? What's up Facebook Live? What's up Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it? What's up YouTube? And I think Wags is on. So yes, it's a good day, man. It's a good day. And I think the first thing we have to talk about, Wags, and everybody wants to hear about, is our dude Jordan Love, quarterback, obviously, of the Packers, QB1. Another really strong outing, I thought, especially a little bit later, a couple series in. But what were your impressions of Jordan Love after now 2 weeks, Wags? We've now seen him against some live starting defenses in the NFL. We've seen, I think, some really strong things. But what's your take? How are you feeling about Jordan Love as we are heading towards this last preseason game, which we've already been told he's going to be playing a little bit in?
Yeah, I thought he played a cleaner game in the second game against the Patriots than the first game, which was fine. He missed a couple of throws. One that was to Musgrave that he has to complete, which we talked about in the last episode. Another, long throw that was a pretty good throw, and as we talked about, the Bengals safety made a really nice play on. So that'll happen. That's just football. But I think in this game, the first series, the Packers came out and Jordan Love set the tempo. He didn't really do anything throwing the football. Packers ran the ball first 3 plays. And Aaron Jones got his carry and left the game. And then Dylan came in and had a couple of nice carries, get a first down. And then I think we had a nice completion to Dobbs over the middle. On a 3rd and long, about 3rd and 7 or so. Really nice catch, nice throw, but probably a better catch, I'll be honest with you. But both Jordan Love and Dobbs connecting on that. So a nice 3rd down conversion. And then that drive obviously is cut short by the errant snap from Josh Myers. Looked like there was a little bit of miscommunication. The snap was wide, but Jordan Love was also looking up at the play clock when the snap came in. So that probably didn't help matters too much either. But either way, so that we certainly need to get that cleaned up. And we can talk maybe a little bit more about that when we get to the offensive line reaction. But came back second series, obviously, again, moved the ball a little bit, had to punt, but really impressive in his 3rd and final series, taking the Packers 96 yards down the field, still against the Patriots defense, their starters. Patriots are a really good defense. They were a great defense last year, and they added some talent with a first round pick, Christensen at corner. And they've got a really strong defensive line and defensive front. So I thought Jordan Love really had great composure, as you mentioned last week, in the pocket, was accurate with his throws, and just really impressive. And on that drive, the scramble, Dane, I think was really cool. he stepped up in the pocket, had really good presence. His feet didn't get skippy. So it wasn't a situation where he was panicking and tucking and running. I think it was the right read at that moment. Had great awareness, is looking kind of head on a swivel as he's running downfield. Felt the presence of, I believe it was Roberts, big 96 for the Patriots on the D line, kind of bearing down on him, goes into a slide, and then Roberts jumps on him, and the rest is just the rest of the offensive players for the Packers immediately coming to defend Jordan Love after that late hit. And Jordan Love, I think, handled himself well, but it was a competitor and got up, snapped up, and was fired up in that situation as well. So that's just really cool to see. And then certainly a couple plays later, just an absolute strike to Jayden Reed. Kind of looked off the safety and was able to get that crosser. Really cool to see, both for Jordan Love and then Jayden Reed. Nice catch, nice play. So we got a little taste of the upside of what this Packer offense could be under Jordan Love this week. And certainly we do expect some inconsistencies, but lest we forget, Dane, and then I'm going to turn this over to you. The Packers offense hasn't exactly been all that consistent early in the season, the last couple of seasons, even with Aaron Rodgers under center, right? So I'm just kind of curious what your take is on Jordan Love and maybe the number one offense as a whole before we look into some other players and reactions on some other guys, and what it might mean that these guys are getting more reps here in the preseason than we've had in seasons past.
Well, it's a good question, Wags. And I'll start, the Packers had 2 joint practices, right, with the Patriots before they played this preseason game. The first camp practice, I thought the Packers won out really well. I thought the second one, frankly, we got punched in the mouth and didn't really respond. From every indication, the Patriots looked really fired up after the first poor day of practice, and Packers looked a little more flat after that. So I'll tell you what, one thing that's been a theme of this Packers team, Wags, has been, you get punched in the mouth and then, hate to say it, but maybe SOFT a little bit. And over the last couple of years in different times of the season. I love seeing that this team, and you mentioned it, Jay Love gets popped a bit and the guys rally around him. I love that this is a team that looked fiery. I love that this is a team that looked like they were more resilient offensively. They did get down early, right? They had some challenges. Again, folks, we know it's a preseason game, but it's nice to see some of these young guys, because they are young. They're all fiery. They all have something to prove. Jordan Love gets, and somebody gets near Jordan Love and you see the guys rally around him. And to watch Jay Love stand in the pocket later on and throw that strike to Jayden Reed. Yes, the offense has had some ups and downs a lot in preseason or kind of early in the regular season last few years, but this isn't the same Packer team. There's an edge to this team that I don't recall. Now, is it the same talent? Is it the same experience? Those are all things that we can debate, but there's a different edge to this Packers team right now. And I'm seeing it. I think we're all seeing it before our eyes right now. We're seeing this young talent. We're seeing a mix of guys that, want to take a leadership role. We're seeing guys that want to be the guy. But what I'm seeing early on is this is not a team that's going to shrink. I really don't think so. This team looks like they're going to find an identity through being maybe this young up and coming roster. So I really like seeing it. They got to clean up this snaps situation. That's probably one of my biggest red flags of all training camp long, is we've seen fumbled snap after fumbled snap. And it's not just one guy, but man, Josh Myers has had his share of fumbled snaps, and it doesn't matter who the quarterback is. So that's something that I'm kind of scratching my head at right now, Wags. And I want to hear from you on if you think it's a Josh Myers thing, if you think it's a Packers thing, or if you think what's going on, because it seems like damn near every practice we've seen some kind of fumbled snap. But from an offensive scheme perspective, from a Jordan Love perspective, from an offensive line perspective, I really like how this team's hanging right now. This looks like a team that is going to build and grow as the season progresses. And I do think it's important that Jordan's been playing these preseason games. They've got this rhythm. All the starters are playing. They're starting to feel each other out. And I just think it's going to benefit this Packers team once week 1 happens and the Packers head to Chicago.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good segue into, let's maybe talk a little bit of the offensive line, stay on that side of the football, and certainly the snap from Josh Myers. And you're right, it's not just a one-time thing. That seems to be a theme throughout the offseason in OTAs and in training camp practices as well. So that's going to be a situation that we're going to have to continue to monitor. It appears that Zach Tom has locked down the right tackle position. We expected Zach Tom to be a starter somewhere, and that's not a surprise. I think one thing that is interesting with the whole development around Myers in the center position is Hansen got hurt. I don't know if there's a significant injury in this game. We've got Myers that maybe has slightly regressed in his performance in year 2 last year, has had some nicks and injuries in his first 2 seasons. And now we've got quite a battle for the swing tackle spot, apparently. Rasheed Walker starts at left tackle since Dave Bakhtiari isn't playing any of these preseason games, ahead of Yosh Nijman, which was a little bit of a surprise, perhaps. We don't know for sure if that's, Dane, a situation where they just want to get an extended look at Rasheed Walker. Obviously, Yosh Nijman is in a contract year. I think you kind of know what you're getting, but Coach LaFleur just said, you know what? Walker had a good game last week and he had a great week of practice, and we wanted to give him an extended look against the ones of the Pats. I think this is a smart decision by the coaching staff. Injuries can happen. So let's see how this young man can fare. I don't know if it's necessarily that he's ahead of the pecking order of Yosh Nijman at this point, as much as it is, this is an opportunity to really get a better assessment for Walker's readiness to come into a game if there is a situation there they would require him to do so. So it is a competition, and I thought he played really well. Dane, I don't know what your assessment was, but frankly, this whole offensive line, aside from the bad snap, I thought played really well this week. We set the tempo. It's going to be interesting to see once the regular season starts, and obviously we don't have backups coming in the late first quarter or early second quarter, how the game plan shapes out. But we really ran the ball effectively against this Pats defense, and that was a nice thing to see. I thought it was very balanced. I never really felt like we were in a situation where it was an obvious pass situation or we were putting ourselves in long down and distance situations because we threw the ball on first down, threw the ball on second down, and now it's 3rd and 10 because you had a couple of incompletions, or that would ruin the flow of a drive. It really felt like they had a good game plan and that everyone was on the same page. So that was a frustration that I think we and a lot of Packer fans had at times last year as well. So it's only one preseason game, and so we'll see if that continues to manifest itself from how the coaches are calling the game and how things come together from a game planning and a game flow perspective. But gosh, is it great to see the offensive line get a nice push in the run blocking, and then also really get some nice protection in pass pro as well. So we saw kind of the good of both sides of that. And so that was really exciting to see that, Dan.
Yeah, it sure is, man. I'm looking around this roster right now, and there's a lot of hotly contested spots, right? There's a lot of things that we're keeping an eye on. Somebody that's really popped since training camp started is Malik Heath, the wide receiver. And we've talked about Jayden Reed, and there's a lot of talent, I think, right now. But what do you make of Malik Heath? Because I watch him, Big 18, and every game that we've seen, every practice, he's a guy who just mauls guys as a blocking wide receiver. He's a guy who makes the catches, who stretches the field. And right now, dare I say, I'm not sure if he's so much somebody that I don't know if he's somebody that is battling for a roster spot as so much as battling for playing time for this Packers team into the regular season. So like, is Malik Heath just like a revelation for this Packers offense? Because, we go in and we sit here and we go, oh man, so many national media types talk about, oh, Packers don't have any depth and they're so inexperienced, yada, yada, yada. But now I'm sitting here going, could the Packers somehow carry 7 wide receivers because there's so much depth right now? There's so many young guys that are popping. So, what do you make of Malik Heath? Jayden Reed's been phenomenal. There's so many other young guys. Dubose is coming on late. Hicks has been good. So how are you feeling about this wide receiver room, I guess, is the broader question.
I feel pretty good. I mean, they're still unproven, so we'll have to see, how that continues to develop. We need to see consistency, certainly. I think it's been a great thing to see Dobbs play really well the last couple of weeks, not only in these games, but in practice as well. He was someone that I mentioned a few episodes ago. I expected him to start coming on. He was the talk of camp last year. Started, I wouldn't say slow, but just wasn't really necessarily as impactful the first week or week and a half of camp. And he's certainly, I think, gotten his momentum. So that's great to see. Dane, I think 7 receivers, maybe. Here's the thing. As high as I am on these guys, I don't think that there's going to be a ton of teams around the league that are going to be poaching our 6th or 7th receiver and putting them on their 53-man roster. So it's good to be excited about these players. So I'm not saying this to temper our enthusiasm for what we seem to be developing in this room. But I think the reality is, we'll probably be able to stash 1 or 2 of these guys on the practice squad, depending on what the numbers are at some of the other position groups. So I'm not terribly concerned. I think one thing that is interesting is it really seems like Jayden Reed, maybe he's your 3-4 for all intents and purposes, your 3rd or 4th receiver, but it looks like he's going to be out there an awful lot. Malik Heath, as far as I'm concerned, he's basically earned himself a spot on his 53-man roster at this point. So, and frankly, he might be earning himself a spot as maybe a 4th receiver as well, and getting some snaps because of what he can do as a blocker and really, frankly, just his overall performance the last few weeks, both in practice and in games. So Samori Toure was someone that we thought maybe would step up into like that number 3 receiver role. And he's getting a lot of reps in special teams as a return man, particularly this week, both kick return and punt return. So Dane, I know that's another area of the game, but it does affect the wide receiver numbers as well. So what is your take on that? Because Toure, I think, is someone that some people are really high on, but frankly, he's been pretty quiet as far as the receiver this preseason, and it appears he's been surpassed just based on performance of some of these other guys that have come in and just taken it by storm. So what's your take on Toure, and is he someone that could be in danger of making the 53 versus someone like Malik Heath or a Dubose or someone else that's really, or a Wicks that's really coming on strong and might have an opportunity to steal a spot on this roster?
Well, it's funny you ask about Samori Toure, specifically. I thought a little bit about that and watching him do so much of these special teams duties, but not, your traditional coverage roles, right? As a return man. And there's 2 ways to look at it. One way to look at it is potentially, hey, the Packers, Samari's making this team, and the Packers are, looking for that backup return guy. The other way you could look at it, and I'm not sure if this is accurate, but it's possible, is, hey, what do we have here in Samori Toure as a return guy? We're trying to find another reason to keep him around. With some of the competition that's going on. And I'm not sure, if that's necessarily the case, but let's not pretend like Samori Toure was a 2nd round pick or something, right? And we like his game, so I'm not trashing the guy. And I do think he ends up making this roster. But to your point, Malik Heath is just flashing. Dubose has been injured, but he's coming on strong now that he seems to be healthy. We really like what Hicks has been able to do. You start mentioning these young guys, and I mean, obviously Watson, Romeo Dobbs, Jayden Reed are locks. So now we're talking about, if the Packers keep 6, which is roughly what I think they're going to keep here. I don't think they keep 7. I think they keep 6 personally. So then really we're talking Hicks, we're talking DeBose, we're talking Malik, Heath, and Samori Toure are battling for 3 spots. Who are the kind of those final 3, and do they think they can sneak somebody on the practice squad? So remains to be seen how this all shakes out, but you're going to have to be able to contribute on special teams to make this roster. That's the nature of the league. That's the nature specifically of the Packers. We've seen it at the running back spot in the past. I'd like to actually get your impressions of the running back spot next. But right now, I think we're trying to see everything Samori Toure can do. Kind of the wide breadth of what he can do. But I do think it's still important that he comes out and has a nice, strong third preseason game. The Packers are going to give him that opportunity. I think that they're looking to see that development grow. We're not in camp every single day. We see what's open to the public. But I think he's done enough to earn a roster spot this year. But my goodness, there's more competition than I think any of us could have anticipated when we were, rolling into August here just a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, and I mean, we're talking about potentially the third string return man, because you've got Nixon obviously, and then Jayden Reed was
Good
also
point.
someone that they really felt strongly about, and they're not even needing to give those guys reps at this point. So it is curious. Yeah, it's nothing against anything that Touré's done wrong. It's just, unfortunately, this is competition. This is a big boy business, and sometimes guys just surpass you based on their performance, and it's a good problem to have as a fan of the team. Obviously, we're rooting for Touré to be able to have a moment here and maybe solidify his spot on the roster as well, because I do think, as a receiver in particular, he still has some ability and some upside. But the reality is, to your point, he's a 7th-round pick. He's a little older for being a second-year guy. So, it wouldn't be shocking, I don't think, if the Packers went with one of the younger guys as well. Dane, I think maybe we should move over to the defensive side of the ball. And did you want to mention something? But otherwise, I was just going to say, my goodness, defensive line and edge. I mean, Enegbare, I think, is a great place to start, but I know it's 2 different position groups, but how can we not talk about this D line as well? And what Carl Brooks and Colby Wooden in particular were able to do out there. Just so exciting to see these young guys amongst a couple others as well. Brenton Cox Jr., I think, is someone else to potentially be excited about. And so just curious, your thoughts. You played defensive line as just a really stout defensive lineman in your playing days. So, this position well. So I would really love to hear your thoughts on what you're seeing from these guys and how that could translate to being able to really help this defensive line group as a whole once the regular season starts up.
Yeah, let's talk about JJ Enegbare right away. I mean, last year was he a 5th-round guy? Last year, he popped in extended playing time in Rashawn Gary's injury. And my goodness, man, he's growing, right? And that's kind of the theme of this Packers team. And we're not looking at this through green and gold lenses. We're looking at this through football lenses, right? We've seen a number of young guys take a second-year leap, and we're seeing some of the young guys that are rookies this year making an impact early on, not just in camp against each other, but against other NFL players, and they're playing at a high level. So that's what's really exciting. That's, I think, what we're so excited about with this. But let's start with JJ Enegbare, who, you and I've talked about it. We looked at each other last year, and we were like, dude, 55 is going to be able to play in the league. And all he's done this year is come out and continue that trend. And obviously the Packers invested, and I love that they invested early and often, right, in this edge position with Lucas Van Ness, and they brought in Brenton Cox later. And we obviously already have Preston Smith and Rashawn Gary and Justin Hollins. We have all these other guys, but JJ Enegbare brings this unique set of skills where he plays so well with his leverage. He's so fast off the snap wags. He's playing the run better, I think, this year in the limited snaps we've seen. So not only as a pass rusher, but that's that second part of this game that is so challenging, is a lot of guys can get after the quarterback, but then they get swallowed up in the run game and they're not prepared for that, or they have trouble setting the edge in the run game. And we're seeing JJ Enegbare grow I think, in year 2 as somebody that can not only be an asset in the pass rush, but potentially also in the run game. And he's going to earn spots this year. And he's making it so easy and hard, right? He and Brenton Cox Jr., I would say, on this edge group, because traditionally the Packers have carried 5 edges. Now with Rashawn Gary looking to be ready to go way sooner than I think I had anticipated, we're looking at an edge group that I would mention it. We're 6 deep if we're counting Brenton Cox, and as much as I'm not as concerned about maybe some of our late round wide receivers getting poached off a practice squad, I'm not feeling the same comfort in Brenton Cox Jr. Brenton Cox Jr. is a guy who played incredibly well. And the reason he was undrafted in college was not because of what he could do on the field, was because of some maybe past indiscretions off the field. By all intents and purposes, and by everything that we've read so far on Brenton, dude's been a model citizen in Green Bay. Just as we expected, I think, Preston Smith, Rashawn Gary have taken him under his wing, and he's really listening. He's really buying into Green Bay football. So, if he's going to take that step, I would really hate for us to bring him in, get some good tutelage with him, with some of these veteran players, and then say, okay, we're going to try to sneak you on the practice squad, because he's another guy who's just balled out, not only in the first game against the Bengals, where it was like, holy smokes, who's this guy? But he got another hit on the quarterback against the Patriots. He had another tackle against the Patriots, and he just looks the part of a potential NFL pass rusher. So look out. All of a sudden, we've got these young guys in Enegbare and Brenton Cox, in addition to, obviously Lucas Van Ness. And we're not getting rid of Justin Hollins. He's been way too important in addition to all of our starters. So this is a really, really deep edge group right now. Great problem to have. One of the most important spots, but I really think this year the Packers might break a trend and keep 6 edge rushers, which is wild to think about based on how the Packers have done this in the past. But I just don't know how you play musical chairs outside of that 6. They've all been too good this year.
Yeah, and I mean that kind of goes into decisions about keeping, 7 receivers,
Right.
and those are kind of some of the factors you have to think about, because you're absolutely right. And Lucas Van Ness, it clearly looks the part. Hasn't necessarily had that impact moment yet, but this gives the Packers a real ability to manage snaps, not just as Rashawn Gary comes back from injury, but all throughout the season. Not just with Rashawn Gary, it's Preston Smith. He's a guy that's in his age. He's over age 30 now. He's one of the older guys on the roster. So you can bring guys in waves and have confidence that you're not going to have a significant fall off in performance, where in years past I don't know that we had that luxury. Kenny Clark, Rashawn Gary, Preston Smith, back when Zadarius was on the team, those were guys that really didn't come off the field in any situation. Now, not only in the edge group, but let me segue over to defensive line. It seems like we've got some young guys that not only are, replenishing and turning over this position group on the defensive line a little bit, but can seem to really play. So this is really exciting stuff. And, the 2 guys that really popped certainly were Kyle Brooks and Colby Wooden. And this is exciting stuff, Dane, because Devontae Wyatt was apparently the player of camp for the first week or 2. And so they haven't even really had him out there for too many snaps in these games. So that's going to be great. And hopefully that continues and translates into the regular season, because now we've got Kenny Clark, we've got Devontae Wyatt, maybe in a year or 2 making a jump. We know what we can get with TJ Slayton, and you add Wooden and Carl Brooks, I think, presumably to this group, and that's a 5-man defensive line that's got a heck of a lot more talent than we've seen in Green Bay and in quite a few years, to be honest. If that is something that can translate, what we're seeing right now, what our eyes are telling us is not, something that I think is deceiving. So I can't be more excited about this development, Dane, because now Kenny Clark doesn't have to go out there for 65, 70 snaps every week. We can manage his reps, and those are going to be more impactful snaps when he's out there for maybe 58 to 60 snaps instead of 68 to 72 snaps. These young guys can come in and spell them. We've got more depth if there's anyone that gets injured or nicked up for hopefully nothing long-term, a week or two. So this is really something that could make a significant difference in this Packers defense being able to finally get over the top and make a step and become one of the better units in the league based on the talent that we have, both in defensive line and in the edge positions, because it's going to be hard to keep some of these guys off the field.
Well, and this is what's so funny about some previous years when we're talking about this kind of youth movement in Green Bay. Haven't even mentioned Jonathan Ford yet on this defensive line. And Jonathan Ford's a guy who was on the roster all year last year, took up a spot on the 53, basically a redshirt year for Jonathan Ford. And he's made a massive leap as well. And he's pushing the Packers. And, it's such a good problem to have. And even in the previous years with, teams that are really, really strong going deep in the playoffs in Green Bay, you could find some holes, right? In kind of the youth drop off, or we had some veterans that were maybe eating up some spots. I think of Dean Lowry, particularly in the defensive line, as somebody that just, I thought, took up a spot and blocked a little bit of the development of some of the young guys. And that's no longer the case here. And Jonathan Ford's been another guy that's just balled out when given an opportunity, did it again on this evening. But you mentioned Colby Wooden and Carl Brooks. I mean, these guys are synonymous together because they're both young guys, right? That came in the same year here. They're both rookies, but they play the game so violently. They play it so well. And it's I think they got a guy in Carl Brooks. They're both good, but Carl Brooks was sneaky good, I think, in college. Now we've seen him. He's making that leap. And if you said it, if we could be rotating on this defensive side, not only with the defensive line, but also in the edge. This is a defense that's going to be young and it's going to be fast. It's going to mirror some of these young wide receivers in the sense that they're youthful, they're a little less experienced, but they can play the game of football. It's early, but I think this is one of the deeper Goody drafts that I can recall, just kind of looking at it on paper, because we're, I think, accustomed to seeing a couple guys pop in preseason, a couple guys don't. Right now, early on, we're seeing a lot of the draft picks and the undrafted guys coming in here and popping on tape against other teams' competition. So the proof's going to be in the pudding. We're going to have to see what they can do against, elite NFL starters. But so far, so good with this defense, and particularly this defensive line and this edge group. And then you start to look around, Wags.
Before we cut over, I was just going to say, and if you don't think that doesn't make a difference, I mean, how many times over the last few seasons have we seen teams wear down our defensive front by the mid-third quarter, and and we're getting gashed, and this is why this defense has not been very good against the run for years and years. We just have not had the talent in that defensive line group. All respect to some of the guys that we've seen move on. They're just not as talented. And so this is potentially a group that will be able to bring in and play some snaps. And hopefully that translates to not getting worn down in the second half of football games when the other team is really doing a ground and pound style of game plan against the Packers. So, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that can make a big difference, not just week to week, but over the course of a 18-week regular season as well.
So the one other thing I want to touch on, and Wags, as we're talking through this, I think after the next preseason game, we're probably going to need to do some predictions on who we think actually makes this roster, because
it's going to be tough this year.
It's going to be tough. And I look around and I've seen, some of these media orgs do a lot of different, they're kind of putting their projections out there now. I really believe a couple of these spots we're not going to know until after this. And I think it's going to be really hard for these, for the GM of the Pack with Goody and the scouts and everybody else that's going to be involved here. But I got to ask you about a couple other spots. Corner and safety, the defensive back group here. A couple, Ballantyne, I know, went down with an injury here. I think Keandre Thomas has played really good football coming on late again. He's had 2 strong camps in a row, so that's really exciting to see. But what I want to ask you about is, one of the darlings of camp has been Valentine, the corner number 37 that's coming out of there. And then more broadly, the safety group, right? Because there's a ton of safeties in camp right now. So what do you see out of Valentine this time? I think it was a little bit more of a welcome to the NFL moment. He had some high moments, but I think also had some struggles after a really strong camp here against the Patriots. And then also safety. We got a ton of safeties in camp right now. And I'm just kind of curious, next to Darnell Savage, who seems to have kind of locked up that role, the Packers been rotating a ton of safeties. So what are you seeing there? And what are you looking for going into this last preseason game?
Sure. So I'll start with Valentine. Yeah, he had a tougher week. Got called for a hold in that first series that on a third down play that would have gotten the Pats offense off the field and probably would have attempted a field goal. But they were able to get a first down because of the penalty and run it in on the next play. So that can happen. Got beat late in the half on kind of a skinny slant route. Tried to jump it a little bit and just mistimed it. So he just has to, I mean, I'm sure he'll get corrected and that's going to be corrected in film, but knowing the situation, right? Especially, it doesn't matter, I guess, any time of the game, but particularly in a 2-minute, you got to know the situation and really make sure that you're in the right position. So that was certainly, as you said, something as a coaching opportunity. And then he had one other penalty in the second half. But what I will say, Dane, is it didn't really affect my confidence in what Valentine can do. Maybe we can pump the brakes a little bit and saying that he needs to be, the starter opposite Jair in week one. And moving Rasul to safety, although I did promote the idea of potentially moving Rasul to safety in the offseason. It doesn't seem like that's going to be the move right now. And then I get a little hesitant about the idea of doing that once the season starts. So Valentine, just to complete my thought, what I really like about this kid is he's competing no matter what. Like he bounced back and made a few nice plays, even when he had a couple of tough moments in this game. And so I think he's for real, Dane. I don't think this was something that just happened, but the proof is in the pudding. It's a long season, and hopefully he can stay healthy. I think he will have some opportunities. There's always injuries in the cornerback room, no matter what. So again, hopefully those are more of the short-term variety when they do happen. But certainly he's someone that's minimally has earned an opportunity to get out there on the field. I think of some different packages. So we'll see what exactly that looks like when Eric Stokes comes back. That'll be another variable, but similar to the Rashawn Gary situation with all the guys and Enegbare and Van Ness and all the guys on the defensive line stepping up and on the edge, potentially allowing you to bring them back slowly, manage the snaps. I don't know if Stokes will be bought back before the regular season or if he'll be on the pup for the first 6 weeks. That's been a very quiet situation. We haven't heard any news about, but either way, it's nice to know that we've got some depth ready to step in behind Jair, behind Rasul Douglas, behind Keyshawn Nixon, etc. In a guy like Valentine, and he's going to go out there and I think be able to, for the most part, get the job done. So that's my thought on that. As far as a safety, Dane, I mean, I'm going to kick it back to you because we've really been drilling down on this. I thought Rudy Ford got the first opportunity in this game. He was the starter alongside Savage. Tavarius Moore got hurt at some point. I don't know the extent of that injury, so that might become a factor. Let's just say this, and Ennis Gaines has been hurt too. It hasn't obviously been a situation that anyone stepped in and run away with it. So that's my read on it. And I'm sure I could give more thoughts, but I'm going to turn it back to you and I'd like to hear what you have to say on the safety position as well.
Yeah, you mentioned Innis Gaines, and he played some nickel as well. And I mean, he's popped in special teams, and he played some meaningful defensive snaps late last year, but he's hurt, right? So he's going to have to get right. I fear that that's going to be a tough hurdle for him for final cuts, and he may start the season on the practice squad again. That's just my initial impression with that, just based on the injury. But looking at the starters, I think Rudy Ford is when he's out there, he plays with kind of a reckless abandon that I really like on this defense. I really like what Jonathan Owens has brought as well. I will say though that Darnell Savage seems to be the guy that's locked up the safety spot, but I'm not so certain if we don't see a rotation throughout the year where we see potential times where Rudy Ford and Jonathan Owens are out there together, right? And Darnell Savage is moving around somewhere else, or maybe Tavarius Moore to a certain degree. But if I had to do an odd man out right now, bold prediction, it would be Moore is on the outside looking in based on everything that I've seen in camp. Because this is a roster spot that just because you don't have two defined guys doesn't mean you can keep six safeties, right? And Dallin Levitt's another guy who plays a ton of special teams, doesn't play a lot of traditional defense. So when you start to look at the numbers, I think we're going to have Savage there. I think Rudy Ford personally has the edge right now based on play, based on his comfortability with the defense, and with a Jonathan Owens a close second behind him. But again, I think they're all going to rotate in, and it wouldn't surprise me if Tavarius Moore also makes the team, right? Sticks with the roster and gets some looks as the season wears on. I think the guy that's looking outside right now, looking in, is probably Anthony Johnson Jr. I like his game an awful lot. He's a young guy. But if we're talking about guys that we might be able to sneak on the practice squad to grow a little bit and kind of get NFL ready, it might be an Anthony Johnson Jr. And I know he came in with a lot of folks very, very excited about him, us included, just based on the overall view that we've seen, I think, throughout camp. I think Johnson can be a player in this league, but he might be more of a practice squad guy to start. And we're going to look at maybe more of these veterans to fill that role until somebody sorts it out. And it might be up until, week 4, week 5, week 6, until something gets settled. I mean, you think about Keyshawn Nixon last year, right? We didn't get the special team stuff settled until mid-season when he got an opportunity. So we're going to see some rotating, I think, early on in the year, see who's popping. And if somebody seizes the job come week 1, week 2, week 3, I think that's how we're going to go into it. But I'm not as nervous about the safety group, Wags, as I think some Packer fans are. I really like what Rudy's capable of doing. I think he's a playmaker. He's a ball hawk. I really like what Jonathan Owens can do. And the Packers have the guys there. I think that they're going to mix and match based on personnel. They're going to mix and match based on who they're playing each week. But right now, I'm thinking it's Savage, Rudy Ford, week 1 down in Chicago.
Okay. Yeah. And I think what's interesting as you talk through all of those guys is several of them are big contributors historically in their careers in special teams. So Tavarius Moore was a key special teams player for 49ers, former 3rd round pick. Maybe hasn't worked out for him to get on the field as much as I'm sure he would have liked as a safety on the defense, but they signed him as a potentially impact special team player. Rudy Ford, we know what he's meant to special teams. Dallin Levitt, obviously Bisaccia loves him. But he's not someone that I think is in the mix here for playing actual snaps and safety. So, and then Innis Gaines is, I think, another key special teams guy. I'm not sure how much Jonathan Owens, I think early in his career, he may have played quite a bit. I'm not sure how much special teams he played for the Texans last year. But the interesting thing, or the point I was going to make, is at some point, you can't keep all of those guys just because they're special teams, because the skill set becomes redundant. So interestingly, they're gonna, whoever wins the battle to be the starter and maybe the primary backup, they're gonna make the team based on their defensive capabilities. Whoever wins that battle. That being said, at a certain point, and this is true of a lot of these decisions all throughout the roster, but I think it can't be more true than at the safety position. Who do they project to be the guys on special teams, and who do they think are really winning those jobs? Because they don't need, if it's Dallin Levitt, yeah, he might be great on special teams, but push come to shove, if it's Ennis Gaines is giving you just as much as Dallin Levitt is from a special team standpoint, but maybe is a little bit more likely to be able to step in on the defensive side, and you have more confidence in him there. You have to make that calculus at a certain point, because we've got all of these guys that are special teams aces. So, I don't want to say it's a redundant skill, but for a lack of a better way of thinking of explaining it, in some ways, you're almost a jack of all trades, master of none type situation with some of these guys. And so it's going to be interesting to see how they rate each of those contributions. If you're not a core special teams guy, but you're kind of in the mix for the backup safety position, versus core special teams guy that maybe slightly in the mix, but not quite as much. I'm thinking of a guy like maybe an Ennis Gaines right now because of his injury status. How do those decisions get made? It's not going to be easy. And I think that's going to be what's making projecting this 53-man roster so challenging.
It's a great point. And Gaines can play all over the defense. That's the thing. Like he's somebody, I think anybody who listens knows how we feel about Anders Gaines. He can ball. I just want him to get healthy. Like I really
get healthy. Yeah.
He get healthy. Like we need him healthy, because we think he can be like a player on defense and special teams for this defense. One other pivot point on special teams I just want to note with the running back and going back, but we were talking special teams. I noticed Patrick Taylor's like the one guy who's played core on both preseason games so far on special teams. And I know everybody talks about Emmanuel Wilson, and they should. He's balled out. But Emmanuel Wilson's played 2 special team snaps, and Patrick Taylor's played like all of them. and they love what he can do on third down. So just don't be surprised. Patrick Taylor is deep in the mix yet again, not only because of, what he can do on third down for the Packers, but also his special teams play. I think that Emmanuel Wilson might be more likely to be a practice squad hold. Packers only carried 2 running backs going into the regular season last year. I'm not sure if that's going to be the case again this year. So that's just my little note there.
Yeah, I think they probably will carry 2 running backs again. And then they'll have 2 guys on the practice squad that they'll be able to rotate through and call up on game day / have depth if there's an injury to Jones or Dillon. So, I could be wrong, but that ability to do those game day call ups is a game changer for the running back position. So we'll see. I could be wrong on that, but I would anticipate that they'll just go with the 2 again this year, at least to start off, depending on what the status is of everyone else on the roster. It's just too much of a challenge, and unfortunately the running backs continue to get the short shrift. But the reality is that's kind of a wants to have and not a needs to have in terms of the third running back on the 53-man roster, considering that they've got multiple guys that I think for all intents and purposes, they would feel comfortable bringing up on game day.
Yeah, it's a good point, especially as that first couple of weeks before the injuries really, knock on wood, catch up. Like it gives you an opportunity to keep another guy that you like a Brenton Cox Jr., for example, right? Knowing that you're going to be able to, likely sneak some of your running backs onto the practice squad. So that's a really good point. So finally on my end, Wags, Anders Carlson hit some field goals. How do you feel after this? We've seen the ups and downs. We're riding the wave, the Anders wave. Anders wave. So how are you feeling now after some big field goals for him on Saturday night?
He drilled it, so that's good to see. I mean, it's better than the other. I don't know. I don't have much other of an analysis to give you on this, Dane. I believe it or not, other than just to give him kudos. I'm glad his first opportunity in game action at Lambeau Field. He coolly hit both of his extra points as well. One of them was moved back 5 yards because of a penalty. No problem, just drilled him. 52-yarder, drilled it. That would have been good from several yards back. But we can expect, just like any kicking situation, there's probably going to be some inconsistencies for Anders, but it's progress. And so that's all I got to say about that. I haven't changed my opinion that the front office is being hard-headed about this situation and not bringing in another kicker. I'm not someone that was crying for Mason Crosby. I know we talked a little bit about how that could impact how you use a guy like Anders moving forward. But for Pete's sake, why they didn't bring someone else in to compete is just befuddling to me, and it's just reminds me so much of the Amari Rogers situation. Different guy, different position, but it's just how they've managed some of their specialists and special teams in particular. The last couple of seasons just doesn't make a ton of sense to me when you've got someone that's unproven and hasn't gone out there and shown that they can do the job on Sundays, just seemingly getting handed the position.
Preach, Wags, preach. On all of that.
That said, kudos to Anders. Seriously, happy for him. Good for him. Glad it went well. So
yeah, we want it to go well. We're on Team Anders here. We want him to get fewer goals. Anything else that stuck out to you? As you know, I think we got 3 practices left, right? And then we got 1 preseason game, and then we're talking cuts. So we're really inching towards this season and this final roster makeup.
Yeah, I got to clean up the penalties. Way too many penalties. And yeah. Preseason, I get it. Got lots of guys out there rotating in, but that's got to get cleaned up significantly. Both teams were pretty highly penalized. So sometimes you just get that crew, but at the same time, that's coaching. I'll be anxious to see what it looks like here in the final preseason game, and hopefully guys get that cleaned up, and Coach LaFleur and the rest of the staff get that cleaned up, because nothing would be more frustrating than having a young, inconsistent team that gets bedeviled by having tons of penalties week over week, because that's the last thing you need when you're trying to get some rhythm and some consistency. Is just making your life that much more challenging for yourself.
Well, listen, this is fun. We're back, baby. Football's in full swing in Green Bay. 1 more preseason game to go. We'll be back on Monday next week, talking some more Packers, starting to predict some things. And then, folks, all year long, we talk a couple times a week. We do a preview pod. We do a post-game analysis podcast. We're looking forward to coming back to you all year long. Remember to follow us on all the social media platforms you can imagine. We simulcast live on Monday evenings currently. Come regular season, I think that's going to be the same. Monday evening post game and Thursday for pregame, and it's going to be a lot of fun. Anything else, Wags? Housekeeping before we wrap up?
No, man. Thanks so much for following along. Really enjoyed it tonight. Appreciate everyone for joining in here. And as always, be legendary and go Pack Go.
Pack Go.
Every year I know we gonna go hard. We been that team ever since Bart started. All my cheese heads go Pack Go. Ain't show with no mercy, cutting no slack, no. I ain't a bad sport and I'll even wish you good luck. Only thing I will